What is the name of our show?
Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Large Glass. My name's Todd.
I'm Terri.
And this is our weekly show where we bring you a new artist in their studio to talk about their work. How's it going?
How's it going?
It's going okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent. We have an awesome show for you tonight. We got lots to talk about. We've had a really busy couple of weeks, but we're about
in a good way.
In a very good way.
Yeah.
Not in any kind of like bad thing way, but we're getting ready to break into summer. We've got exciting stuff on the horizon, so it feels good. And the weather
is so lovely. Yes.
I have to tell you, I listen to a couple of podcasts, and one of my favorite podcasts is the Blind Boy podcast. It's a guy out of Ireland, and he often does these really, really long, he covers a variety of topics. But anyway, he ended his podcast today where he said, go outside tonight, right around 7 or 8 o'clock. He said, and smell what the world is giving you at this very moment, because it's amazing. There's just something in the air that, I mean, it's obviously all the buds and the flowers and that, but there's a richness to that smells so
definitely
good.
Is.
So good. So hey, wait, we got people hanging out here. We got Mom.
Hello.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Pumpkin Audrey. Thanks for dinner, Pumpkin Audrey.
Thank
again.
You very much.
Oh my God, you're spoiling us. You're spoiling us.
And we love it.
and we're going to take every bit of it.
Yeah.
There's Ben Hagenbush. How's it going? David Backus is here. Good to see you.
Hello.
There's Marsolis. And of course, they're both here, Gia and Marsolis. I won't say your name, Marsolis, because it's, your screen name. But Gia offered hers up, so I can say that.
They're filtering in.
Yes, everybody's coming on the show.
Okay.
Did we have a pin winner?
We did.
Yeah?
Yes.
So tell us about our contest this week.
So our contest this week, I posted an image of a clip from a very spring-inspired painting by Renoir. And let me just pull up the winner. It was Carol Shatford. So she's going to be getting a limited edition, super cool pin. And I'm going to do my best to send it out this weekend. So
Sure you are.
I am. It's funny because when we had our open studio last weekend, there were a couple of people that came and they said, I never got my pin. So we were actually handing them out at the studio, which was kind of cool.
Huh.
So in person.
That's true.
Yeah, but stay tuned on Thursday. I'll post another contest and you'll have another chance to win.
Yeah, excellent. I love that contest. Let's drink, because I have a rant associated with drinking tonight.
Let's drink.
All right. So we just had a laugh with our artist, Fred Hayes, in the green room over there over tonight's drink of choice. Because Fred had suggested that we have a Merlot. And I was excited because I was like, oh, good. I haven't had a Merlot in a while. And I like a good Merlot. And when Terri went to pick the Merlot up, she had trouble finding it. Now, we know why. Many of us know why this is, but some don't. So, Glenn Lavertu is here.
And he's still waiting for his pin, and I will get
Glenn,
that out to you. I promise.
Give her the business, Glenn.
I promise.
Because, So, Merlot, over the last, I don't even know how long, 15, 16 years, has suffered a catastrophic downturn in its popularity due to Paul Giamatti and the movie Sideways. Because in the movie Sideways, which was sort of a low, not low budget, but a lesser known film.
It was an independent film.
It was an independent film that actually won an Academy Award. So it was, quite successful, if that's your measure of success. But it was a very good film. And in it, Paul Giamatti says, my ex-wife loved Merlot. If anybody at this table orders Merlot, I'm leaving. And then he went on to talk about why Pinot Noir was a superior wine to Merlot. And so Merlot takes a nosedive. People stop buying it. And Pinot Noir's production in California goes up 170% in response to an independent film. It was absurd. So tonight, we're on with Fred a little early so we can get everything hooked up and get him ready to go. And I said, did you pick up a Merlot? And he laughs and he's like, no, I couldn't find one. I got a Pinot Noir. And we were like, it was just perfect in terms of like how that all just, So thanks to Paul Giamatti for screwing up wine.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've got Mike Rader Potato Head is here. I'll donate my pin to the next winner. Already got one. Love it.
Awesome.
That's nice of him.
That is nice. And Tom Park is here.
He says he already made being into wine.
He also made being a whiner the most unattractive thing ever to most people. He did.
Right? But how many people absolutely loved that movie? I mean, that movie was a hit.
It was.
So we have the Chateau Saint Michel Merlot, Columbia Valley, 2018. Nice bottle of wine, actually. I actually have had this in the past. It's good. There you go.
Oh, wait, thank you.
It's for you. Oh, ASMR. Here we go. Oh, yes. There we go. Alan Wexler's here. He loved the movie also. Hi, Alan. Yeah, no, we're not denying loving the movie. Like, I loved the movie also.
But it affected wine culture for sure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It totally did. So here we are. Episode 89.
89.
We're coming up on that 100 mark soon. We're going to have 100 in July, I believe. Is it July?
July, yeah. It's towards the end of July.
Yeah. We got to work on that.
We do.
We do not have a plan for the 100th.
We don't. So we'll take suggestions.
If anyone has a suggestion for how to deal with the 100th episode of The Large Glass, please let us know. This is all for you guys. Cheers. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a good show tonight. Let us know what you're drinking in the chat. And yes, Ben, I loved it when they drove the car into the tree also.
It's actually very good.
Yeah.
He did Merlot a disservice.
We knew that already. I mean, yes. Alec Baldwin walked right past me today when I was standing outside of the institution I teach at with all these babies. And Alec, I hope you're not watching. But he had, and I came home and I said to Terri, I was like, Alec Baldwin walked right by me outside of the school with all these babies. They must be his grandkids. And Terry's like, oh, no. He's got babies. So I saw Alec Baldwin's kids today.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Do it outside with guests and neighbors for the 100th. Oh, yeah. We should have an outdoor stream.
We could. We'd have to work on sound, I think.
No, we could do that.
Okay.
We could do that.
Yeah. That'd be pretty cool.
Mom says he has 5 or 6.
He does. He has quite a few children. Yeah.
It was not our plan tonight to gossip about Alec Baldwin, but, because he might get angry and come over here and yell at us.
He might.
No, I'm just kidding. All right, so we had a really cool experience this week.
We did have a cool experience. I actually saw something on, because I watch Instagram, I follow Instagram stuff quite often, and Art Yard posted an event that they held this past weekend. It was a workshop to make costumes. They have the Hatch Festival coming up on June 25th. This is in Frenchtown, New Jersey at the Art Yard, and it's this really cool festival where lots of artists come out dressed in lots of costumes. Birds is typically the theme. They emerge out of this huge egg.
Right. So what's happening there is when Jill Carney founded the Art Yard in Frenchtown, New Jersey, there's a history in Frenchtown of having chicken hatcheries in the town. And I believe one of the buildings Art Yard acquired was in fact a chicken hatchery. So to commemorate the history of Frenchtown in that respect, and to also sort of cultivate a sort of an idea around community and the history of the town and art and creativity and rebirth, they have this event called the Hatch. The Hatch starts with the biggest egg I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And everybody dressed in some kind of bird costume emerges from the egg and participates in it. It's very bread and puppet. It's very mummer. It's very kind of.
It's very awesome.
It's really beautiful. So they held an event this
weekend, and it was a costume making workshop, and they had all the costumes from previous Hatch parades there as well. And we brought the kids, and we worked on costumes, and it was just such a great time. And anyone can participate. Anyone can bring a costume. If you don't have a costume, they will lend you a costume.
Yes, the actual Hatch Festival is coming up
on June 25th in Frenchtown.
So you want to make a trip out?
Yep.
Make a day of it.
It's very cool.
You can hatch from an egg with us.
Yep, and you can go to artyard.org
Yes,
and
I'm
find
going
out
to
more
actually put
about it.
artyard.org into our chat for you so you have it right now. But definitely go over to their website and check it out. Jill Carney's doing amazing things over there. Like
Yes.
the place will blow your mind. It's an international. It's an institution with international gravity in a small Hunterdon County town. We're so proud to have that. So Carolyn Thau is here. Hi, Carolyn. David Backus says, sorry, no Merlot allowed in my house. Long Island Rosé tonight.
I bought a rosé too. It's in the fridge, but we were going to do Merlot.
Yeah, we'll get to that one.
We are.
We'll get to that one later.
Tackle that one.
All right. So let's start talking about tonight's
Yes,
artist. Can we do that?
Yep. Okay. I have a very long introduction tonight because he's an amazing artist with a very impressive resume. So tonight we have a special guest. He's a painter and a sculptor, and he explores identity, social constructs, and culture in both two-dimensional and three-dimensional representative forms. New York-based artist Frederick Hayes was educated at the San Francisco Art Institute. He earned both his BFA and MFA there. He's had numerous exhibitions nationally and internationally, and has had his work featured in both solo and group exhibits. Additionally, he has received many grants and fellowships, including the Pollock-Krasner Grant twice, the NIFA Artist Fellowship, the Robert Blackburn Workshop Studio Immersion Program Fellowship, the Art Council Juror Award, the Eureka Fellowship, and the San Francisco Art Commission Individual Artist Grant. And there's more on his website, which we will share with you later. He's also been featured in numerous publications, including the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Diego Tribune, Time Out, and many others. Roberta Smith has written him up a couple of times. He's participated in several residency programs, including the MacDowell Colony Residency and the Headland Center for the Art and so forth. His work is also housed in public collections, including the University Art Museum in Berkeley, California, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco, Addison Gallery of American Art in Andover, Massachusetts, the New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York, the Studio Museum in Harlem, De Rosa Preserve in Santa Rosa, California. He's also an educator. For everyone watching us tonight, please join us in giving a warm welcome to Frederick Hayes.
Fred, I forgot the curtain. How you doing, man?
Ta-da!
I did that. How's it going?
Got the curtain. That's fine.
You're going to let me off the hook on that one? I did this whole thing telling you, listen, we're going to have a curtain. Here's what the curtain looks like. But our audience will tell you that about, 3 times out of 5, I forget the curtain. So
Curtain is probably, you could probably do it.
Is the curtain too much?
Yeah, the curtain's a bit too much anyway, yeah.
How are you?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Excellent.
And Dr. Terri.
Hello.
Thanks for that fabulous introduction there, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm just feeding off of your history, which is quite something.
You might be our longest introduction ever.
Yeah.
I think. So thank you for joining us. We're honored to have you. And we've been talking about your work for quite some time now. And well, actually, why don't you start us off with your usual question, because I think that's a good place for us to start.
Yeah, so there's always a question that we initiate the whole conversation with. And Todd and I are pretty familiar with your work, especially after the past couple weeks, because we've been really diving into it. So we know what it is that you do, but what we have you do for our viewers is to describe your art and what it is that you do.
Okay. Excuse me. Well, I work across media, creating sculpture, drawing, paintings, primarily focusing on African American working class. I'm interested in communities, identity, urban centers, neighborhoods, issues around housing, and labor, of course.
And
so, I guess I'd have to say I do a lot of portraiture, which is, obviously, if you ever looked at my website or seen any of my work on Instagram. But in general, I think all the work somehow even when I'm working in sort of an abstract matte form, where I use grids a lot, I'm always interested in the human condition on some level.
Gotcha. You know, and I want to jump right into like one of the, like, there's many reasons I'm excited to have you on tonight, but one of the key ones is, you know, we typically look at artists and we're like, well, this is a painter, this is a sculptor, this is a photographer. But I love finally being able to talk to somebody who crosses between a variety of media. And I like the way you approach both ends of your media. So I'm curious, when we talk, and we're looking at an image right now on the screen of an installation of a show of yours where all that work is yours. And when you approach sculpture versus painting, can you talk about the difference between those two realms for you, just in a general way at first, so we can kind of like just see how they differ?
Okay. In a general way, you mean sculpture versus painting, or sculpture?
Like how you think about the difference between the two of those places. Like, I think they function in different ways for you.
In a way, they function. They both, well, a lot of the earlier work had a lot of color in it in terms of my sculpture. Now, some of my recent sculpture, I don't have as much color. But in general, and regardless of the medium, I'm always thinking about shape and form versus line. So I think on some level, all of my work is about sculpture. Whether I'm painting or drawing, I think I'm always thinking about, the form in more of a three-dimensional space, as opposed to sort of a flatness, and using the line to sort of elude, to make an illusion of that space, to allude to that space. I'm always thinking of in terms of actual space, even though I know when you're working two-dimensionally, that actual space doesn't exist. But my concept is always, I'm always trying to, make things round regardless of the surface.
Right.
So in that way, they different. That's how they are similar. How they differ is in the obvious fact that, once you're working in an actual three-dimensional space, you actually have to deal with it, and if you're going from 2D to 3D, sometimes you have a tendency to forget about it, about that actual space that you now have to deal with. So, sometimes there's a period of adjustment.
Yeah.
But that's about, for me, they're similar, and they all sort of feed off of each other. But ultimately, I'm always trying to make things in the round, even when I'm working on a flat surface.
I love that. I actually hadn't, in all the things that I've either talked to you about, read about, or watched in other videos, I hadn't heard you say that before. But I like that you're bringing that up now. Now, I threw up one portrait and one sculpture just so we could kind of see the range between the way the two things are handled. But I don't want to bounce all over the place to throw our viewers off. I kind of want to focus in either one realm or the other. So I might just go back to sculpture for a few minutes. And when you talked about the fact that there was a lot of color early on, I'm not sure, like this is an earlier piece versus this, which is a newer piece, correct?
Yep. Yeah. Well, early meaning recent, but there's even much earlier work from San Francisco where I did a lot of sculptures back there that had color in it as well. So I've actually worked with color in my sculptures for quite some time. And so I actually going to the more monochrome works is definitely more recent, but I worked with color for quite some time.
Gotcha.
So even the picture that you just showed, the previous one with the tape, that still is a result of having worked with color on my sculptures for years.
Gotcha.
Not that recent, although that was probably, I think that's 2018.
Gotcha.
I believe.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So What's it like if you're thinking about 2D in the round and 3D in the round and color in painting, like when you're dealing with some of your portraits and you're thinking about the color in a portrait? Now that you're I know that right now you've moved away from color a little bit in some of the recent works, but what role did color play for you when you were working with the sculptures? Like, I mean, obviously you're using the inherent colors in the materials you find. It's not like you're painting the sculptures, but how did you deal with color?
Well, actually, the earliest sculptures were painted. These more recent ones that have a lot of tape on them. That just came about as a result of having done a lot of painting previous sculptures. And so after making sculptures where I would paint them a lot, it was sort of, and then just going to like Home Depot and happening to notice this particular type of Gorilla Tape. I just decided that that was just as good of a color as actually, buying a tube of acrylic and using acrylic paint on it.
Yeah.
So all of the sculptures and painting early on, I pretty much used acrylic paint for the sculptures and painting. And I can't, and these sort of recent works that are done with primarily tape, I guess now that I think about it, this is what led me to what I'm doing now, the more sort of monochromatic, the ones that I have slightly less color.
Right.
And the reason how I got to this point, because I didn't really have I was just working with recycled things, and I really didn't have a real good studio to work in. And so, but I just had the urge to make something. And like normally, if I had a studio that was sufficient, I probably would have been using, wood, nail and screws, drills. But because I didn't, the only sort of equipment that I could use was tape and maybe zip ties and maybe rope and electrical cord, things of that nature, to put these things together. That it sort of just came about out of necessity.
Yeah, I love that though. I love that because I think that limitation actually made the work that much more interesting.
Yeah. So it was sort of not being able, not actually having a studio, but having a place where you could just sort of put things together. So that's sort of what led. That's how I got to this sort of point. And also once I saw the colored tape, I thought that could sort of serve as as a painting device instead of actually using painting. Although I was still painting at the time, I was still making paintings, but I was so excited about the color from this red blaze orange. This was actually at a studio. So, there's some points where I didn't have a studio, and then there's points where I did.
Right.
I actually worked on this piece for a period of years. I worked on it. I initially started in maybe 2015, and I would work on it. It has a lot of different things in it. Wheels, a Glidden spreader, rubber, wire, PVC pipe, an old, like a water bottle that was cut in half. And so it has a lot of different things, wood. And also, I want to say a lot of my sculpture, probably even my current work, a lot of it is inspired from, I'm going to say, African power figures. Particularly a lot of earlier work in San Francisco, but even this, but I didn't, as you know, like a lot of African power sculptures, they have a lot of nails.
Like an Nkisi.
Yeah, yeah, they have a lot of nails driven into it, and every time they'd have these ceremonies, they draw. That's how they are actually made over a period of time, where you each ceremony they put nails into the sculpture, and that's why when people see it, they think it was well. Did they actually do all these nails at one time? No, it was like over a period of years and these various ceremonies, and and each time they'd have these ceremonies, they put these nails into this figure. Uh, so I did a lot of work in San Francisco where I tried nailing things, but in the more recent work that I've done here, just like maybe when I started this in 2014 and a little bit earlier, I mean, I started incorporating things like I didn't want to do the nails so much, so I started incorporating things like electrical wires and power cords. Because to me, power cords is the same thing as if you wrap power cords around something that gives it, a same sort of a power as like, metaphorically, is like the nails in sort of the wood sculpture.
Right, right. So for
Yeah.
some of the viewers that don't know what an Nkisi is, it's in that the reason they drove the nails into that was to invigorate the spirits that lived inside of that totem, and it would sort of empower. Was it typically used in some kind of ceremony where this is what I remember from years ago, where somebody would come to the figure and ask it to perform a task for them. And then the nail would be driven in to invigorate the spirit to help that task be performed. Am I on the right track there?
I think so. That's pretty close. Yeah.
So then when you're doing that with these sculptures, in a sense, by trying to empower them, but in different ways,
Yeah.
I kind of like that connection. So there's a question in our chat that's asking the size of the piece, but then I also kind of want to know how long the piece sort of was activated for, like how long you sort of added to this thing.
Well, I started this iteration, this particular state. It was I think the last time I worked on it to get it to this point was in 2000. I'd say maybe 20. Yeah, 2020, when I added the little top piece and put those little those zip ties that sort of go around like the parts of on an umbrella or something that sort of hang down.
Mm-hmm.
So that was maybe 2020. Yeah, 2020 or 2021 was the last time I worked on it. But I started on this piece maybe 2014 or something like that.
All right, so almost 6 years.
Yeah, 2014. But that's not to say I couldn't have done it in a shorter period of time. But so for me, when I think about it, how the work relates in terms of it being power figure, I think I don't always think about, what elements I'm adding to it, but that's definitely a part of it.
Right.
I think about the shape and how it relates to me and how and the figurative elements that I try to imbue with the image itself.
Sure. And I love the way over, let's just say in this case, 6 years, how I would imagine in 2014, you didn't see the end result of this in your mind. This kind of grew over time as you grew, and the identity of this piece kind of like altered and changed.
Oh yeah. On the back there's a stuffed animal, so there's a lot of stuff. Of course, it changed. Yeah.
I'm gonna keep.
I didn't, and that's an even earlier piece.
I'm backing up through time a little bit, just so we can see. But I'm gonna move forward eventually.
Okay. Actually, this is actually around the same time as the previous piece, but this was pretty much. I maybe worked on this twice. I think I worked on it maybe 2014 and then again maybe 2016. But that's a big piece. It's like maybe close to 7 feet.
Gotcha.
And do you have a lot of pieces in your studio that you just kind of sit with for a while and kind of ruminate on them and think about them and keep revisiting them later on down the road? Like even when you think a piece is done, do you ever return to it later on and kind of add something to it or maybe change it up a little bit?
No, I think not so much now. I still have, like, I always sort of keep a mental inventory of like past works.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like if I'm in between an object, I'll go back and maybe rework some things. So I always have some things, mental inventory of things where I sort of just set aside. I'll say that it's finished, but then in the back of my mind, maybe somewhere down the road. Yeah. So very similar to what you're saying. But not so much now. With the things that I'm doing now, I guess I'm finding that I'm finishing things a little bit more to my satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these earlier works, a lot of these works, because they combine so many different types of materials,
Mm-hmm.
they required, you get to the point to where you're not sure what to do with them next.
Yeah.
And you set them aside and you go on to something else. But with a lot of the current work, and also because I've just been working in this manner for so long, also because of a lot of the current work, I'm finding that I'm a little bit more satisfied with it, so I don't need to go back and rework them as much.
Yeah, I'm curious actually about the materials and how you collect them. Because
Yeah.
I know you mentioned, if you go to Home Depot or something and you see something like the tape and it catches your eyes, but the diverse nature of the materials that you're working with, I imagine that your studio has quite a variety. How do you go about collecting materials? Do you just happen upon things that you like and you just want to work with the material, or?
I guess I think initially years ago, I started working with a lot of plywood and maybe scrap pieces of wood. I was doing like maybe sort of like constructions, maybe in the vein of like Rauschenberg years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not in that, but I called them constructions. I put it like that.
Gotcha.
And eventually I evolved to more three-dimensional things. And somehow I've always been fascinated with like maybe softwoods. So, and 2x4s, sort of construction lumber.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, the bulk of the wood, I know it's not the best wood, but what I like about it is that I like the immediacy of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I like about with all of my works. I like something on some level, it sort of gives me sort of an immediate satisfaction. So I like being able to make quick changes. I can do that with softwoods. I mean, in terms of my craftsman-like skills, I know they're not like top notch, but craft has never been like a big factor for me in terms of working with wood, particularly when you're working with softwoods. I mean, I know I could do maybe similar things with hardwoods, but depending on the degree of development, it may take a lot longer to do.
Right.
Just depending on your interest. But what I've always been inspired, I've always enjoyed working with softwoods. Douglas fir pines, 2x4s, 1x2s, 1x3s,
Right.
things of that nature. And a lot of that is often found, in the city, in the streets, while you're walking around.
Right.
When I did this, I had a studio on Hall Street, and sort of in between Flushing and what's that other street? Flushing and Park, and that's sort of industrial down there. So and also the building that I was in, there was a lot of artists in the building, and so there was always things that were being like put aside. So there, things, or you could walk around neighborhoods around there in Clinton Hill and find scrap lumber sometimes in neighborhoods, particularly on the freeway pass there.
Mm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the BQE, where all those cars parked. So sometimes I would just walk around and, gather scrap pieces of lumber and take it back to the studio and go from there.
You know, it's perfect timing with this sculpture up. I was, of course, I'm thinking of Jim Osmond's work. And he pops in on the chat and says something. It's a great comment, though. He says, but what I love about Fred's work is how much he lets the process happen and gives material its autonomy, which is kind of what you're talking about right now, right? This kind of like the nature of the material's nature of itself. You kind of allow that to kind of be.
Yeah. Again, that's important for me. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess if I wanted to, I could try maybe some hardwood, but, having the right equipment. But for me, in a way, I know I said like, in a way, the working with wood this way is a lot like painting. In that it has a certain in that I can allow a certain amount of freedom, but at the same time, it's three. Here, this is an instance where I know I talked about earlier about how I'm always thinking about sculpture, no matter whether I'm painting or whether I'm drawing or what, I'm always thinking about shape. But at the same time, with the sculpture, I still I like to allow for it to to be malleable if possible.
Yeah. That's something that's interesting because softwoods have a kind of utility about them. There's that malleability that kind of comes with the softwood that, you're talking about special equipment for something like, let's say you were working with maple, and the fact that, before you could drive a screw into maple, you got to pre-drill the thing, right? So it's like a bunch of extra steps. And then on top of that, there is this quality that comes with a hardwood like that just seems to be otherworldly. Like it's like this to me is so much more direct in how it lives. Like pine and Douglas fir and 2x4s and construction materials, that they kind of have a much more recognizable utility, I guess.
Yeah, but there's a couple pieces of hardwood in that piece.
Oh well, yeah, I'm sure it's not without it. But then it's a good segue into some of the pieces you're doing with pallets.
Yeah.
So how'd you kind of make the transition? I mean, it seems obvious to me, but was there a moment where you realized that this kind of came in a package you liked?
Yeah. What I liked, I had a studio. I had a studio up at Mount Vernon, and every day I would whenever I would go up there, I'd get off the train. It was about maybe a 15-20 minute walk to my studio. Every day I would pass by, on the way to the studio, I'd pass by this little factory, a little small factory, and they would always sit pallets out there. And I guess I looked at them for like 4 or 5, maybe 7 or 8 months before I finally decided to grab them. But for me, the thing about the pallet is I was thinking about labor, because a lot of contemporary issues that, it's one thing, then one second is the body, the next thing it's identity, and it's labor. And I had been hearing a lot about labor in terms of subject matter, but I know that it wasn't. In one sense, it is subject matter, but they're also referencing the fact about art being a form of labor as well. But I also, another thing that attracted me to the palette was because, as I said, I had a big interest in working class people, and particularly working class people of African American descent. And it's something that, it's like one of those jobs, not just African Americans, but everybody does, where particularly semi-skilled or young or skilled. If you end up working at these factories driving forklifts, so and everything is on a pallet, it's delivered on a pallet. You see it at construction sites. It's a thing that it's a vehicle that they use to transport materials. And so and also I had been seeing it in like a lot of galleries too. I noticed a lot of contemporary artists had started they've always used the pallet as this sort of default pedestal, for these large sculptures. They were using it, and I just thought that it could, I'd say, well, maybe you could do something else with it. So it was a lot of those things. The amount of construction that's always going on in New York that you see no matter where you're going, issues around housing. So all those things sort of came into my thinking, or were part of the impetus for doing these things. And one of a bigger thing that I liked about the pallets were like, they were very easy to make, even, you could almost look at one and very well and see how it made. And I liked the simplicity of it, but I also liked how I could make it a little bit more complex by adding other things to it, or duplicating it very simply with just straight cuts. So it had a lot of things, a big appeal for me in terms of like the things that I mentioned. Go ahead.
And I got to admit, these last three images that I showed, I can't help but also notice that, and I'm about to jump over to portraits in a minute.
Because I was to me, that like, I'm seeing a lot of portraiture elements in these too.
There's two figures.
There's two figures. I think back to the totem element that we saw
the power
in
figures,
the earlier sculptures.
And the fact that these have, they're nailed. They've got this other kind of life that they kind of bring to the table. So I feel like the connections here between what you've already talked about with some of the earlier work and this are just right there. And then when we jump over, you also mentioned, and I'm going to bring this up as I put up a portrait. I want to start with like a painted portrait. But you were talking about the difference, not tonight, but I've heard you talk in the past about the difference between internal, external, when it comes to the difference between portraits and sculptures. But so how does that relate? Like, we're going to move, I guess, to the external now, right? Because we're seeing something that's more portrait-like.
Yeah. I said the portraits, I see the portraits as more of an external, these sort of representations that are these masks or faces that we present to the public, and that that actually are there, and that determines our identity. Whereas the sculpture work is more internal. So it's more about the self. It's more like it becomes more human, but it becomes more like belief systems and sort of individual psychics. So in that way, they become persons as well. And it's the kind of person that could inhabit anybody, or regardless of your class or race or what have you.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool that you were talking about the power figure in relation to the sculpture, and this notion of, how the activation of almost a spirit inside the piece, for lack of a better word, in relation to the Inkisi, that's like the right word, but it kind of has this, everything about its activation is an internal activation, right? So then when we move over to the portraits, it's a much more sort of like one-to-one meeting with, the two external elements, I guess.
Yeah. And also, I guess, I don't know if this is confusing, but I don't necessarily, again, the whole idea of like activating a power figure, I think the viewer activates it, because a lot of these sculptures, once they get placed in museums, they take on a whole different sort of context than what they had when they were in their when they were like in Africa, right? So it takes on a whole different context. So once they're put in a museum when we finally get to see them, you know, we're putting stories on them that it's not it's it, I guess the meaning changes, and also when the individual artist does them, I think we're seeing them, we're not creating them through the same lens. We're creating them through a lens based on what we've been told, or maybe what we've been read, or maybe what we've read in terms of like about the history of them. But that's still not the same lens as it's still a different perspective.
Absolutely.
So a lot of go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say absolutely. No, I'm
Yeah.
just agreeing with you, and I really feel like there's no way once they're taken out of their context and placed under that glass, and we walk around in wonder and awe, and we learn about them. There's just no way to make the genuine connection. They've now been removed, right? So I feel like that's really really hard to do. So when it comes to your own work, then, and the viewer completing that sort of that empowerment or that activation, I kind of want to ask you a Duchamp question in there, because there's something about, I saw one earlier with a stool, but what do you hope for, or what have you heard from viewers around your work in terms of that answer, in terms of that sort of completion, I guess?
I don't. It's hard to say. I don't know that I hope for anything. I mean, I just use that as a sort of a starting point, and I think each individual viewer is gonna get out of it what they, I don't. It's really up to them what they're gonna get out of it. But I can't say that I'm gonna make something and it's gonna make a person act a certain way,
Right.
just because I call it a power figure. Or may not. I mean, it's great if they do it. If I could make something that powerful that it could actually change somebody's belief systems, or what have you. But I just a lot of, I'm just not. I don't make it. I don't make it necessarily with like with the intent of trying to create some kind of healing device or something like that.
Sure.
When I, in terms of power figure,
Sure.
But I think it itself has power, but that power is not. It's not the kind of power that you could like. You don't want to go. It's not going to cure you of anything. In other words.
Right. No, definitely. There's a couple of comments I want to throw out there. So Jess Park says the repurposing of the pallets and giving them new life also makes me think of the renewals or rebirths we may go through from time to time. John Park says, I love the way that the colors have been used here in this portrait of this woman to emphasize light and shadow, which was the one I just had up. Yep. Ben Hagenbush is saying earlier, I love how Fred uses different colors that somehow all work in conjunction with one another. On that note that he's mentioning, and your reference earlier to working on the portraits as if they have a three-dimensionality, your grounds, when you paint, I'm interested a lot in how you deal with the ground in some of these, like the one Terry's about to put up right now. Like in this one, the ground almost seems to merge with the figure in certain parts and then really push him forward in other parts. And I love that. Like I was really studying these for a little while. Is this something that, does the ground happen for you in a very sort of a planned way, or is it just, like how do you deal with them?
I'd say it's just organic. It's pretty much organic. I don't. I work from photographs. Some of these paintings I actually painted from looking at my cell phone. and then others more recently. I don't know if you have a slide of it. A lot of the earlier ones, I would print out a photograph of the person and then just work from that.
Mm.
But
Are they people? Are they people that you know, or have you seen these people on the street, or?
well, this particular guy I saw on the street, but that's always been an impetus of the work. Even though I tend to work in isolation in my studio, and a big impetus of the work has always been to sort of make them look as if I had some type of relationship with the person. Mm-hmm. And there's one or two maybe that I have, but the bulk of them I haven't at all. I have not at all. But I somehow want to include. I want all of them to feel as if I want all the images to feel as if I had some sort of relationship with them, but a lot of the bulk of them are found images, and they're somewhat inspired by people that I knew of or that I maybe knew growing up.
Gotcha.
And each one ends up being in some cases just an iteration of, sometimes they're slight changes, but it's just an iteration of somebody that I've made before, just another version of that person.
Gotcha.
But a lot of them are just found images from the internet. And I want the viewer to feel as if I have a connection with all of them, but a lot of them I don't. I just make them up.
Huh. Go ahead. Oh, I thought you sounded like you were about to say something.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, in the art, you create that connection with the person and they become familiar. So
yeah, and you did mention earlier this notion of neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And so on some level, I feel like through that creation of the connection, you're building a kind of neighborhood, right? Maybe not the one we're accustomed to, but I like this idea that you're building this community through these portraits. So there's two more things I want to talk about, and the time
kind of
flew by tonight. But there's two more things I want to talk about, and I'm trying to decide what to put up there first. But we haven't really covered the notion of race in your work, and I think that when we're looking at the sculptures and we're talking about the internal, the notion of race came up, but there were other things that I think that were more evident, like this notion of labor. Especially through material. But now that we move into the portraits and we kind of start to think about the materials in the sculpture and the portraits, I kind of want to just get your take on what role race plays in the work when you're thinking about making it, or what you're realizing or coming to terms with while you're making it.
Okay. I guess, as I said before, I'm always the external, the issues of identity are definitely a part of the work, and it's something that I feel that's important. And I think in general, people, artists or whatever, when you're making work, you tend to make work in the image of yourself. So in that sense, it's not so much about race, it's just about who you are as a person.
Yeah.
So, but obviously you can't, as they said, race is a social construct and you can't get around that. It's definitely a part of who you are. However, if I was of another race, probably most of my paintings or portraits would be, if I was Mexican, most of my paintings or portraits would be of Mexican. If I was a white person, most of my portraits would be of white people.
Right.
That's the nature, of who we are.
Right.
So, but it's still something and also, you know, I have an empathy for, I'd say, working class people, because I'm from a working class background. So all of those things sort of come into play, but I I think that it's still something that's still not on, that's still very new uh, to the art community in terms of its acceptance, you know, in terms of you know, getting used to uh, looking at other peoples.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did.
Uh,
I think you did.
um,
Go ahead.
but
Sorry.
I think I guess maybe repeat it. Give it to me one more time. I maybe answered some of it.
Well, I just really wanted to sort of, I mean, I will say that when we're looking at your sculpture, right, and we're thinking about the way in which the material functions, the forms that you're making, the role of labor, the role of found materials, they're at the forefront. And then when we see that you're working in this both sort of portraiture way and this sculptural way, and you're talking internal versus external, and I start to make the connections between some of the figurative aspects of the portraits that also relate to the sculpture, I start thinking, I wonder what role race is playing in this while you're sort of moving back and forth between those two spaces, like, because they seem to be very different spaces, like when I look at them. And I was just curious what your take was on that.
Yeah, race, you know, it's again, it's a social construct. It can't, something you can't that can't be avoided. Uh, I don't know if it'll ever be a point to where you can't talk about it. It would be nice. But ultimately, the reason why I felt like the need to draw this way or to paint this way was because I felt that, you know, I'd like to I'd like to normalize these spaces. I'd like to
Yeah.
get to the point to where not that race isn't important, but I'd like to get to the point to where it's just as important as any other race.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that.
I'm curious with because you're talking about the labor class and you come from a working class family. When you were younger, like what was the first introduction into art? Did you know that you always wanted to be an artist? I know that that's probably going really back and it's probably a really long answer. But was this part of your background? Did you have an artistic family? What did they think when you went into art?
No, I didn't have an artistic family. Uh, everybody, everybody just worked regular jobs, 30, 40 years, and they retire, you know, get a family, get a big house, retire.
Yeah.
I'm the only
Big
artist in the
checklist.
family.
Okay.
I I think I had I remember maybe three distinct experiences as a kid. Uh, and I didn't really decide to be an artist until like I went to art school, but I went to art school to major in photography.
Mm.
And I always had a camera. I would, that was one thing that I wanted as a kid was a camera. And I got one at a fairly young age, and I always would photograph family members and then walk around town occasionally and photograph things. But other than that, my other distinct experiences as an artist was maybe drawing a couple of times. I think in the fourth grade, I worked on a science project and I made a sculpture with another friend of mine. We actually made a sort of a robot, you know, using cardboard boxes and toilet paper rolls.
Sure.
Yeah, so we made sort of a robot, and that was sort of my only sculpture experience for years. And I was in one other drawing contest in maybe the third or fourth grade that I came in like maybe second or something like that. But beyond that, and I didn't draw again or do any sculpture again until I went to the Art Institute in San Francisco, which was, quite a few years later. But I always photographed. I started photographing maybe 11 or 12 years old, maybe
Wow.
even younger than that. So in photography, from photography, I went to, as I said, I went to major in photography, but then I switched to painting and drawing and things of that nature.
Gotcha. And speaking of San Francisco, I want to throw this last photo up because the day I saw this photo on your Instagram feed, by the way, if you want to follow Fred on Instagram, and I recommend that you do, it's at @FHey_00. So definitely find him on Instagram. But when I saw you pop this photo up on Instagram, you blew my head right off. And that's this. So you were in San Francisco for a time, and you not only showed with Margaret Kilgallen, but you knew her.
Yeah, I knew. As I was telling you guys earlier, yeah, I knew Margaret. And I knew all those guys that were part of the mission. I think Janet Bishop at SF MoMA wrote a book called Mission School.
Mm-hmm.
Or Urban Rustic or something of that nature, where she talked about her and Margaret and maybe Alicia McCarthy, a couple other artists, and then a couple of artists that show with, Alicia McCarthy, and then there's another artist, I forget her name, she's gonna, Zyler Jane. And then Ruby Neri to some extent. Although I didn't know Ruby as much, I knew of her father. But I knew all of them, and as I said, I showed with Margaret 3 or 4 times. In this particular image, we were working on a mural together in San Francisco. So that's a small part of my Bay Area connection and Bay Area sort of group that if anything, but it's all as a result of you could connect it to like the luggage store. We all sort of were connected to each other by the luggage store gallery.
Gotcha. Well, I got to tell you, I loved talking about your work tonight. I just,
We didn't even get to some of it.
I know. There's
maybe my answers were a little bit too.
I know you got these really, you got these really
awesome
amazing new digital collages coming up.
I love them.
And I feel like, like I said, at 9, I like to say, Fred, we cut off at 9 because I want to respect your time.
Right.
I don't want to hang on to you too long, but I do.
Yes, there's so much more to talk about, and these pieces are really interesting. The great thing about them is that they seem to be works in progress that you do post on your Instagram, and people can follow them and see what you're doing there.
But maybe we need to have a part 2 one day, Fred. Like when you maybe when you're rolling up to a show or something, we should get you on again so we can talk more.
Great. Look forward to that show.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. We'll drink Pinot Noir next time.
We're gonna manifest that show for you, man.
We're gonna manifest it.
So, well, listen. Thank you so much for tonight. We really love talking. There's a lot of comments flying in right now. Like, thank you, Fred. Great show. Love talking about your work. Great conversation. So nice to meet you. Awesome work, Fred. So I think the audience tonight really loved it too. So from us,
yes.
Cheers to you, Fred. We appreciate that. So you got your noir, and we've got our Merlot. But listen, stay in touch. And for those of you who want to check out Fred's website as well, you can find that at fredhaystudio.com. So definitely head over there. And Fred, thanks again. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay.
All right, man. Take care. Thank you. All right, let's pop back over here and throw on
I can never
our
tell.
closing. Don't forget to mute, Fred. And we're gonna throw a closing song. we don't want Fred to accidentally say something like, "God, that was awful," which you never know. Like sometimes you get done with a meeting and you leave the mic on. And that was awesome.
That was awesome.
I mean, like...
Yeah, and he has so many great pieces that we didn't put up there. And
you wrote in the newsletter today about how, and I'm going to paraphrase here, correct me if I'm wrong, but how looking at the work of the artist in the week leading up to the show and then talking to the artist about the work are two very different experiences.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I feel like we did all this prep like we always do,
Yeah.
and we're prepping the slideshow and we're looking at all this stuff, and then we get in the same room with the artist and talk about it, and it's completely,
It never goes that way.
but it's revealing.
But that, right, it's revealing, and then it takes on its own organic flow, which
Yeah.
is awesome because you can't plan this stuff.
Yeah, and I wish we had gotten into the portraits a little. This is my bias, but I spent time on the sculpture.
Todd loves sculpture. Yeah.
So,
But I do love how we could see, and prior to really getting to know Fred's work and looking at it, I couldn't really see because I'm a little bit newer than others coming to it, but I couldn't really see the connection between portraiture and sculpture. I thought that they were more two different disciplines.
right.
But after getting to see him and hear what he said about it, but also looking at it, you can totally identify the elements of both the structure in the portrait and that three-dimensional, and elements of that portraiture coming over into the sculpture and how they interplay together.
And on top of that, I had never heard him talk about the fact that he thinks in 3 dimensions when it comes to the portrait.
That was
And it
a
was-
little surprising,
Yeah.
which I'm glad he said.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the benefit of bringing,
Yeah.
bringing it all together.
Absolutely.
So let's see. Next week
We're
have
going to say goodbye to the 80s, and we're going on to episode
90, where we will be featuring the work of and the artist Susan Stillman.
Yes.
We're excited to have her on. If you remember correctly, we gave away one of her paintings last year, which she donated to our show. So we were super excited about that. So she will be coming on. So definitely tune in for that episode. And otherwise, get out there and enjoy the weather. We're going to have a gorgeous weekend. We love having you every week. So please join us again. Tell your friends. Get them in here. It was really nice to see all of you.
Yes.
And we will talk to all of you very soon. Thanks again, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
Have a good night.